never meant to make a scene at my brother's wedding. The plan was simple: slip in, endure the toasts, send a tasteful gift, and fade into the linen and champagne blur. For years, I'd let my family imagine I shuffled mid-range spreadsheets at a boutique consultancy tidy work. Forgettable title. It was easier than explaining what I really did, easier than inviting the questions or the comparisons to Dean. So I wore a simple navy dress meant to erase me and stood near a marble column at the Celestine Grand, where chandeliers threw a winter of light over flowered tables. Waiters skimmed past like underscored commas. I sipped water and practiced invisibility. "There you are," my mother said, arriving with a smile pulled tight as a ribbon. Her eyes skimmed my dress, catalogued its silence. "Why aren't you mingling?" "I am." I lifted the glass. "With who?" "The column." Her smile sharpened. "Busy week at your firm?" "Yesterday I chaired a board session," I said, "because some truths sit on the tongue like an accidental prayer. We approved the purchase of our fiercest rival." I took another sip. "I'm doing fine, Mom. Work keeps me busy." "Busy isn't success, Nadia." She tipped her chin toward the dais. Dean, in tailored black, laughing easily, his hand laid over the glittering wrist of his bride. "Look at your brother, youngest VP at Hion Dynamics, marrying the CEO's daughter. That's something." I smiled, because I had practiced that too. Hion's executive assistant had been begging for an introduction to Meridian Advisory's chief for months. They didn't know the chief was me. "Still hiding in corners?" Dean boomed as he arrived. Leia's dress caught the chandeliers and crushed the light into snow. "Nadia's got her cute little job," Leia sang, which made a few cousins smirk into their drinks. 15 years collapsed. Me first in every class, Dean barely passing, our father's phone calls opening doors for him while mine were treated as polite misdials. The room hummed with confidence that wasn't mine. And then the air shifted. A hush slid through the ballroom, the kind that precedes weather. Andrew Caton Hion's CEO had entered with a face reporters claimed never tilted from neutral. It tilted when he saw me. "Miss Vale," he called, crossing the floor with a speed that made conversation falter. I didn't expect to find Meridian's CEO at a family event. The word hung there. CEO. My mother's glass chimed against her ring. My father's stare lost its bearings. Leia's smile twitched. Dean straightened, then stopped, the shape of his mouth caught between a laugh and a question. "We've been trying to schedule you," Caton said, taking my hand in a gesture that was respectful, practiced. "If Meridian is still open to discussion." "In time," I said, keeping my voice level. "Not tonight." I angled toward the dais. "Congratulations on the wedding, Andrew." "For the room, then," he replied easily but softer. 5 minutes? We found a small anteroom lined with mirrors that repeated us into infinity. I shut out the ballroom and its appetite. "Hion's board is ready to deal," he said without throat clearing. "We've outrun our discipline. I'll stay for a transition, but we need Meridian's capital and backbone. If you come in, you'll have a free hand." "And the redundancies?" I asked. "Merit," he said. He didn't say Dean. He didn't need to. When we stepped back into the light, my family had gathered in a crescent with all the warmth of a committee. My father began with a brittle brightness. "So you let us believe." "You chose what to believe," I said, and for once it wasn't an apology. Whenever I spoke, the subject became Dean. Dean took my arm. "You can't humiliate me. Not here." I eased out of his grip. "Do your job. There's nothing to fear. If Meridian acquires Hion, performance will matter." "Acquires?" His voice fell to a private pitch. "On terms that make sense." I touched the locket at my throat, its hinge smooth as rehearsal. Inside, on paper the size of a fingernail, my grandmother had written, "Belief is a quiet kind of thunder." I had been carrying the weather for years. "Tuesday?" I said to Andrew. "Tuesday," he confirmed. Tuesday arrived like a clean blade. Hion's boardroom rose in glass, and my reflection repeated down the panels. Navy suit this time, hair pinned, mouth steady. Andrew and I entered together, and the director's eyes tracked us with the exhausted interest of men who had worked too long to pretend they were not failing. The numbers on the screen didn't defend them. The numbers had never loved anyone. I began simply. Meridian's proposal, I said, and laid out the architecture. Capital infusion staged to milestones. Governance reforms with teeth. Phased consolidation that saved what was sharp and honed what was dull. And conditions that mattered: independent audits, ethical procurement, promotions by performance, not proximity. Questions came clipped, then crosshatched, then deliberate. I answered without embroidery. It wasn't theater, it was arithmetic with consequences. When the vote closed, the decision took the air with it. Ownership moved first on paper and then in the shoulders of the men around the table, as if their jackets had been refitted. Gravity tilted. Outside the glass, my parents sat on a lobby sofa, coffee cups held like talismans. Dean stood alone, jacket off, his face indeed rimmed with a night's reckoning. I asked Andrew for a minute and walked to them. "So," my father said with effort, as if assembling the sentence from unfamiliar tools, "we're family again." "We always were," I said. "We just weren't honest." My mother's mouth trembled. "We're proud of you, Nadia." "I didn't need proud," I said, not unkindly. "I needed belief." I touched the locket. I had it anyway. Dean's eyes were red at the edges. "What happens to me?" "The same as anyone," I said. "You start in junior sales for growth markets. Training, clear quotas, clean slate. You earn your steps. If you don't, there's severance. No shortcuts." He exhaled a sound I had never heard from him, something unarmored. "Okay," he said. And the word was small, but it was new. Back in the boardroom, we signed the first stack, then the second. Andrew squeezed my hand lightly when the last page turned, a gesture neither proprietary nor familiar, just an acknowledgement of transit. Outside, reporters had already gathered, rumor thickening like weather over the curb. We faced the microphones, and I introduced the new Hion. Lean, fair, focused. No weddings, no bloodlines, only work. That night, the city lit itself like circuitry. From my office window, the avenues made clean arguments in light. The boardroom's starkness had already given way to the pre-work. Lists, names, maps of overlap, the first gentle carve that says, "We will keep what works. We will release what doesn't." My phone throbbed with congratulatory messages and strategic warnings, but I set it face down and opened the locket. The paper had faded, but the sentence remained. "Believe first. There is a story families like to tell, that daughters are safe when they are small, and sons are kings when they are almost." It had been told about me and about Dean without anyone noticing the tearing at the edges. I had let the story continue because quiet is a habit. But belief isn't a drum. It's a weather system you carry intact until the day you open your hand. In the days that followed, the mergers team built their scaffolds. We walked factory floors that had been polished for visitors and found the corners where dust never learned the word polish. We asked for supplier lists, and when they arrived, we asked for the real ones. The first time a senior manager used the word family to justify a promotion, I nodded and then asked him to define the metrics by which his own son would be evaluated. He did. Poorly. We made a plan to hire his replacement together. Andrew kept his promise. Transition, not interference. In a quiet conference room lined with bad art, he told me what he'd misjudged and what he thought I might. "You like clean cuts," he said, not unkindly. "Sometimes the angle has to be odd to land true." "Angles I can learn," I said. "Avoiding rot is the job." He smiled like a man who had finally put down a weight. "You'll do." A week later, Dean sent a text with a photo. Him at a battered desk with a headset. A faint, sheepish grin. Below it, 3 words. "Hit my quota." I stared longer than the photo deserved. It wasn't triumph. It was proof. At home that night, I found the navy dress I had worn to the wedding and ran my fingers over the seam where the hem had been let down once, then twice. I had made myself smaller for so long the tailoring felt permanent. I folded the dress carefully and placed it in a box. When my parents came to dinner, my mother started to apologize, not in her words, but in the angle of the napkin she smoothed against her knee, the way her voice circled the point. "I should have," she began. "You loved the tools you had," I said. "You taught me how to hold a room with a tight smile." I looked at her hands, still restless, still precise. I learned how to let go. My father raised his glass. "To belief," he said, unsure, but brave enough to say it. "To weather," I answered, touching the locket at my throat. "The quiet kind." Later, at my office, I stood again at the window. The city glowed, thin as filament, bright as intention. In the glass, I saw my outline multiply. One version of me in the navy dress, one at the boardroom table, one stepping through a ballroom's hush as a man with too many headlines spoke my name correctly. They stacked into a single image when I squared my shoulders. There wasn't thunder tonight, not the noisy kind, just a clean, steady hum, like current through wire, like a promise kept. I closed the clasp of the locket until it clicked, turned to the stack of work waiting on my desk, and began.